hiring experience to separate the great from the good, and will help you adapt to the challenges of hiring remotely. This brings faster hiring, reduces bias, and gives your engineers more time to solve problems that matter. That's why we're already working with some of the best engineering teams in the world. Schedule a demo with us to learn how we can help you shape the future of work today. Codility, remote tech hiring everywhere.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for joining us. We're here to discuss better hiring processes and some lessons that are learned with OLX and Vonage. I want to introduce you to Manjuri Sinha from OLX and Daniel Hecker-Campbell. Would you guys like to say a little bit about yourselves? Daniel, would you like to kick us off?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. So my name's Daniel. I'm Director of Talent for Product and Engineering at Vonage. I'm based in the UK. Looking forward to the conversation.
Hey, everyone. Hi, Daniel. Hi, Anne. Nice to be here. Welcome, everyone who's listening into the session right now. I'm Manjuri. I'm Director of Talent Acquisition for OLX Group, and I'm based out of Berlin. And I'm super pumped, not just because we were talking about dogs and cats like 5 minutes ago, but also pumped about discussing the engineering hiring process and how you can amp that. Yeah. So thanks for the invitation.
I think it always makes us happy to talk about dogs and cats. I think that cheers everybody up, and it certainly eases things for us. And I'm Anne Chadwick. I'm the Director of Customer Success for EMEA and APAC here at Codility. So firstly, obviously, we've introduced ourselves and gone there. I would like to talk a little bit more about what your recruitment process was like, Manjuri, prior to you working with Codility. Daniel, I know it's slightly different for you for there, but Manjuri, would you mind telling us a little bit about the whole process at OLX and kind of the thoughts and whys you purchased Codility?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the relationship with Codility goes way, way back, even with my previous company. When I was working with Zalando, I think that's where we started with Codility. When I joined OLX in 2019, the first thing was looking at the hiring process and how we can make it scalable, how we can go pack agnostic to kind of ramp it up as well. And that's where the thought of bringing in automation on the assessment part with Codility was something that was something that I considered. It's been interesting because we've seen a lot of different ways of amping this with Codility being there, be it on our hiring process, aligning with the assessments, ensuring that we have hiring days, ensuring that we have weekend drives. That is something that we do in India in our engineering teams, and to ramp up the engineering team super quickly, we can get the code check done back to back. I think that's a huge activity that we do in India. You also have a challenge for most of the hiring in India that you get a lot of applications, which is different to how we hire in Europe. So you need to filter that out, and that's where Codility has been really, really helpful. The other areas also on the Europe side, where we needed to increase our hiring funnel and reduce our time to hire, which I'll talk about in the next steps as well. And that's where Codility has been really, really helpful. We've also seen advantages on the D&I metrics, which I can elaborate later. So it's been a boon all along, and really a great partner on my tech TA landscape in our organization to partner up with other automation tools and really seamlessly connect through and support the scalability of the process.
Do you find that over the process of time as well, Manjuri, that obviously I know that things, especially with the pandemic, the way that we are recruiting is also different. And as you say about the process that you go through in India and having hiring weekends and doing that type of thing, have you found that automation has been kind of instrumental, I suppose, because that's what I'm noticing, that being able to set something going kind of works better now, or at least speeds things up a little bit?
Definitely, and I think speed plus experience. So we look at our candidate experience super closely as well. We work with Talent Hub there, and our candidate experience is usually above the benchmark of 8, and we land up somewhere around 8.25 on the CPS scores. With that, yes, on the one side, we've been able to leverage code check post moving to everything remote. Of course, now it's super natural for everyone. But in most of the pockets earlier, we used to bring people in, have the interview, etc., on the whiteboard as well. That's definitely changed, and that entire ramp up was a major support from Codility perspective. But on the other side, when I talk about experience, and this is coupled with hiring that we do for Europe or for India and even for Latin American countries, um, we were able to switch to Code Live very easily. There were also product features, I think, last year, which was added on having the picture on one side and having a broader area to work out on the coding aspect itself. And Code Live actually increased our engagement, increased the fact that we could have less dropouts in the process, because candidates could meet our interviewer and talk through the whole activity rather than just taking a take-home test. So even though we moved completely, of course, to remote hiring post the pandemic and moving around, we've also gone full remote and remote first for tech anyways. So this aspect is very important, that yes, you can have the assessment, yet you can spend time with your interviewer, and the interviewer can help pitch the organization during that process. And that's the Code Live experience from Codility, that the support that we saw for sure.
I think definitely the candidate experience as well, like the way that works in the interaction, it's crucial for the overall, especially for your brand as well. Daniel, in terms of the way that things worked with Vonage, I noticed that obviously the process was slightly different prior to you joining, but do you want to tell us a little bit about that process in itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just realized actually today is my 2-year anniversary at Vonage. So for me, yeah, I just realized. But Vonage has worked with Codility. I think we're coming into our 7th year. So I definitely can't really talk to, why or what the decision was for the implementation. But certainly in terms of how we used it when I first joined versus now, we've definitely had some progression, optimization, however you want to refer to it. And, I think Manjuri mentioned it as well, moving towards remote hiring, we definitely had to think pragmatically about how we leverage technology to support that. I think we were all in the same boat, that we kind of had to do it overnight, right? It wasn't a gradual thing, but the flexibility of Codility and the fact that we could ramp that up and the features were there ready was a huge benefit. In terms of I suppose the progression since I joined Vonage, the biggest thing that I was focused on specifically was consistency and usage. Some teams were using it, some teams weren't using it. The teams that were using it weren't using it in the same way. And it wasn't that it was drastically different, actually, that it was consistent in some ways. But things like looking at similar skill sets across different teams, we should be probably looking at that in the same way. We're assessing people for Vonage. Don't get me wrong, there are nuances per team, of course, but we're assessing people to come and join Vonage as engineers. So we should probably look at how do we think about what that assessment process looks like. So I would say the best example of that would be our SDET funnel. The SDET role within Vonage is heavily focused on finding people with programming knowledge. So Codility and Code Check and Code Live actually is well utilized within that funnel. But we now have a consistent test, irrespective of location, irrespective of team, and because you can have, I suppose, as many as there are available anyway in terms of programming languages. It really doesn't matter if one team really wants an SDET with Python, one really wants an SDET with Java. The same test can still be used, and it's just built some consistency in that process. The second thing that I've seen is we did this around the summer last year. Time to hire, obviously, for anyone in TA is a critical metric for sure, and time to get people through the interview process is a critical metric in my opinion. And considering how competitive the market has become, and I know we're going to talk about that shortly, considering the level of opportunities that engineers have in the market right now, how we streamlined our process and how we optimized our interview process overall was really important. And looking at Codility conversion and conversion in the sense of people actually completing it, but then the people who did complete it, what is our threshold? How should we judge, or how should we not even judge, that's not the right word, but how should we use the Codility component of our assessment process in the overall assessment process? Should it be a you either pass or you fail? Should it be a contributing factor? And we ultimately decided that it should have an aspect of sort of pass fail, but it's not as hard and fast as that anymore. Before it was 80%. If you get above 80%, you move forward. If you don't, you don't. We now have lowered that to 60%. We looked at what impact that would have on a funnel, and actually, in the first month of doing that change, we added an additional, give or take, in a month, and it may not sound like a lot, but it was around about an extra 15 to 20 people that moved into the interview process. Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And we have made hires. We have made hires by lowering that threshold. Sorry, were you going to ask a question?
Yeah, I was going to say, and with lowering it, did you find that it was increasing obviously in the pipeline? I know it gave you quite a few additional people that you moved along. Did you find that just by tweaking that a little bit, that it opened things up a little bit more with the candidates that you were looking to? Because I know certainly with some of the candidates in various pipelines, and the way that is sometimes with the testing and doing that and working it, the pass or fail can be quite hard on occasion, but just by tweaking it, again, as we talked about being subjective, and obviously pass or fail is very easy, but I know certainly working with a number of clients that making small tweaks like that can be a game changer for
100%. 100%. I mean, we have to remember that people are people, and the pressure of a test or the pressure of an assessment can throw people off. Even the best people can succumb to that stress or that pressure, right? So just having the opportunity to speak to more people was the biggest impact, in my opinion, giving people more of an opportunity to be assessed more broadly than just one factor. And it's an important factor. We need to have some sort of benchmark and some sort of threshold and a standard, if you will. But actually allowing for those 15, 20 extra people in that first month to have a conversation just meant we were giving, again, a much broader opportunity for that assessment, because not one person is going to be perfect at every component of the assessment process. So yeah, the answer to your question is yes, it did make a big difference. And we've had to tweak it even since then. Some teams have asked to just think differently about that 60 to 80, and how do we, instead of just making it a pass fail, again, it's considered. If someone scores, let's say 59 or 58 or 62, we take a look at it. The managers are willing to review it in a bit more detail, whereas before it was 80%. If it's above, great. If it's below, there was very little room to have a conversation, whereas now there's a bit more room than we previously had.
Have you noticed an impact on the quality of hire with the changing of the testing threshold generally?
Not that I've seen personally. I've not heard that it's impacted the quality of the hire in that sense, no. Is there still a correlation between a higher Codility score and a more successful, a hire being made? Yes. But we have still seen that people who do score in that, what was the original 80 and now the 60% threshold, people who do score in that range, we still make hires, and we still get good feedback through the interview or the rest of the interview process rather. And that's where Code Live comes in. That's where Code Live is a really good follow-up tool, and a lot of our managers will use that in more than one stage of the interview process to really dig into it. Back to my point, someone can sit there in a timed assessment and write some code and maybe doesn't quite hit the mark on one component, but then the Code Live feature allows for the manager to dig into that, to use that task and take it and run with it and have a conversation. And engineers are more than just sitting and writing code. There's a thought process, there's problem solving, is how do they solve that? And Code Live has really helped with that particular part of our assessment, for sure.
And on the flip side of that as well, like when you have somebody who can score really, really highly, and then when you take them to a Code Live, and you might find actually the thought process and the way that they work, and
exactly
logical with the methodological way, I can't even remember the way that they do that is it might not be in correlation with the way that they've shown on a test. But as we say on the flip side, we're always quick to look at if somebody scored badly, how that translates. But quite often I know that it can also work in the opposite direction.
It does, and that's why I was really keen for the teams to look at it more across the different parts of the assessment process, like I said, rather than it just being one component. Again, there is some correlation between a good score on Codility and the prospects of that individual through the rest of the assessment process, but it's not a slam dunk or a guarantee necessarily. So yeah, you're right, it does work the other way as well.
I think it's also interesting that when we talk about the passing and failing scores, like the way that does translate, and I know, Manjuri, same with you guys, and when you're looking at DE&I, as well as, especially within the engineering space, and when we're thinking about neurodiversity and that type of thing, when you are able to do that and have a bit more of a subjective human element, it makes all the difference. So having the option to do that for a yes, no, pass, fail, as well as actually moving something along to have a conversation or actually kind of making it work that way. In terms of top, competing for top talent, as we know, it is insane out there at the moment. Like the way we see things across all of the businesses that we work with. So engaging and getting and keeping engineering talent. Have you struggled with that? Is that something that you previously struggled with? And Manjuri, you're laughing, so I'll come to you first with that.
Yeah, I think most of us have our jobs because of this challenge. So I love the challenge. So jokes apart, of course, I mean, all of us have been struggling here. And this time it's last year, especially if I call this as the post-pandemic phase or things coming back and businesses coming back. I guess we've seen the tables really turn, right? So the great resignation, we've seen the graphs going up for recruiter jobs, and everybody's looking for talent acquisition. So of course, there's also a need and demand for everything in technology. On the other side, people are now reflecting, looking at what is it worth, right? So there's the questions on mental wellness, there are questions on life decisions, etc. So all this coupled, yes, we've seen that. We've also seen a lot of investment. We see investment in the last 6 to 7 months in buckets in Europe. We've seen huge investments also in India, which was earlier considered to be a go-to market for a lot of companies from US and Europe. And today, hiring in India is actually expensive. Hiring product and tech in India is super expensive because of all the VC money that has come in. And you have a lot of startups who are ready to pay higher than the market or go above and higher. So all across, I think we see low response rates. We've seen low offer acceptance. We've also seen dropout rates, etc. A couple of things that really did work, coupled with the hiring process and automation and reducing the dependence on manual activity, was things that we saw. Planning ahead, I think that was key. This is very key for any organization at the moment. You cannot expect that you start a project and you want to ramp up in the next 3 months or 4 months. Absolutely not possible. They need to figure out and work out the time to hire, expected time to hire, work out the hire funnels that we'll need to reach out to, etc., and then kind of plan it in a way. The second bit was that we had to rework on was really looking at what data and insights tell us. Everybody wants to hire in the top 1% of the bucket. But when we look at a simple exercise with LinkedIn Insights on where is the talent, we go into a particular country that we're hiring in, say in Portugal or Spain or something. We look at the talent, we look at a job description, the 8 to 9 requirements on the job descriptions. The moment you parse that on LinkedIn Insights, you literally come down to 0.0001% of the talent. That is the pool where all the, I don't know, 100 everybody is going to. And that is the pool that you reach out to. Probably there would be like 25 to 30% of that pool that comes into your hiring process. And then your hiring process also has a ratio of, whatever is, it's like 8 to 1 or 10 to 1, depending on how high the bar is or how tough the bar is, etc. So that's a learning. And of course, when we looked at, if we just hire in Lisbon or if we just hire in Barcelona, our pool is super small. So that was one push of going remote within the country, at least, where we have entities, which increase the talent pool and ability to give that flexibility also to internal employees. So you reduce the attrition, increase the hiring, and balance that headcount target accordingly. And with Talent Insights, we could also get information on, hey, if you're looking for Golang or if you're looking for PWA as a talent, then you would rather, say, focus on a Berlin than a Romania, and you would have a higher chance of success there. So these are the data-led insights which are driven into the workforce planning itself, not just hiring. And I think that's something super important that we did last year, which helped us actually deliver 56% more hires than we had than we were needed to do for this fiscal year.
That's
which in this crazy frenzied market was absolutely an amazing feat. And of course, it's a great team on the ground. Hats off to them. But these are the steps to take, rather than, okay, you plan and have unrealistic deadlines and you need to chase them, and it's a lot of workload then on the interviewers, a lot of workload on onboarding, etc. So I think that plan ahead aspect is super, super important.
Have you found that you've had to make any, say the word sacrifices, I don't quite mean that, in terms of the skill level of what you're looking for, or maybe tweaking slightly if you say, for example, you have 10 compulsory skills that you would normally insist a candidate have before they would allow them to move into the funnel. Have you found that you've had to pivot a little bit with that type of thing, like the skills that are compulsory?
Yeah, I think it was not just on the skill level, and that's a very good question. I think on tech stack itself, in certain areas, we did have to push back, and business then reconsidered on pushing on Golang and rather went for, okay, let's bring in, we are fine if the person comes in with Java and Kotlin, as long as they are fine to learn in the next 7 to 8 months and scale up. So that was good, being tech agnostic on that. The other aspect that we did have discussions on was the industry-specific requirement. Right. For example, as a platform, if we are looking for our motors brand, then the expectation that the candidate comes from an engineering experience, plus in a second-hand cars sales platform, plus having a particular scale in that company. If you want all three, that's not possible, right? That's like looking for a unicorn. So there they said, okay. Let's bring in from e-commerce. Let's look at similar kind of platforms, but it's fine if it's not cars and autos. So these trade-offs, of course, we had to make. We also had to make trade-offs within the organization, saying that you have 3 projects going on, prioritize the one which has the highest impact, which we can fill faster and with more focus, and then we go for the other 2 as well. We had to do those trade-offs with the kind of crazy market that we are working in as well, for sure.
Daniel, what about you in terms of, obviously for Vonage, and as the market for engineering talent is hot. I know that we're competing with pretty much every company out there, but we're all fighting for the same talent. How have you guys at Vonage handled that?
Good question. It's interesting to hear what you said there, Manjuri, about India specifically. We actually entered into India last year, and it's been an interesting sort of 6 to 9 months, and we've definitely learned quickly around, exactly like you said, the competitiveness, the variety of opportunities that people have. I mean, in some ways, it's no different than other competitive markets like London or San Francisco or Tel Aviv, etc. However, I think to your point, we did kind of go into it a little bit thinking it would be easier, and it's not that it's been super difficult. It's definitely just more difficult than we had originally planned. So actually that's where where I particularly have focused a lot of my energy in the last 6 months, is what do we do to optimize that experience even further because of that competitiveness. And we put some things into play that I'll mention in just a moment. But similarly to your point, Manjuri, as well, that remote first approach or remote option has been a game changer. I think like a lot of businesses, I don't want to say all, but like a lot of businesses pre-pandemic rather, the concept of hiring remote first or hiring people that would be 100% remote was relatively alien, relatively unknown, wasn't super common, let's be real. But Vonage has really embraced that similarly. It's not 100%. We don't offer remote options for every single role, but from a product and engineering standpoint, at least, we went from around, it was in October, we were at about 20 to 30% of our roles were remote. So we peaked at about 75%. And that was just through working with the leaders, similar to your point, Manjuri, showing them some data on where talent existed. And thankfully, we're in a fortunate position, similarly, that we have legal entities in quite a lot of countries. So it wasn't a lot of steps that Vonage needs to take necessarily as a business to accommodate that. There were some, of course, but we were really well primed to do so. And again, it's increased our funnel, it's increased our hires, and it's given a lot of the engineering managers more options. than they had previously. So instead of just focusing on hiring for people that are based in London, that live in London, that want to work in London, which is, again, it's super competitive market, they've been able to hire people in France or in Netherlands or Germany as well, and Spain. Spain is a big hub for tech talent, and we found some great hires in Spain. But before the pandemic, we probably wouldn't have done huge amounts of that. Again, don't want to speak out of turn because I did join during the pandemic, but I'm pretty certain that what I'm saying is correct. But one of the big things that we did specifically for India to help with this competitiveness with talent was we moved towards a centralized panel approach. So instead of, we're hiring and scaling in India. So we know that there's combinations of skills that match well together in terms of the funnel, in terms of building the funnel, in terms of searching for candidates, in terms of progressing people into the process. So we took about 25 to 30 positions that we were hiring for, and we've grouped them together. We found panelists from across the business, across the engineering organization, so that we can get different perspectives in terms of the products, the teams, different people who know different parts about the organization. And we've been trialing this now for about 6 weeks. And why I'm mentioning this is actually Codility. Using Codility has helped us with that. Having used Codility for so long, and that there's trust within the management and the leadership within engineering, that Codility does add value and does allow us to keep that benchmark. We were able to flip our process. Previously, it was Codility, manager interview, panel, decision. So instead, what we're doing is we're doing Codility, the panel, but it's through this centralized panel model. So that centralized panel are making decisions based on, a combination of different skills. Sorry, let me try that again. Different competencies rather, and saying that based on the skill set of this individual, they would be a good engineer for Vonage. We built a skills matrix based on all of the different teams that we're hiring. It's Java specifically. So this team needs Java plus X. This team needs Java plus Y. And, there's still some work in progress. We need to optimize it, but it's helped those panelists make recommendations. And then they go to the manager interview, and then there's a decision. So it's the same process. It's no quicker in a sense. Like the time that the candidate has to invest is the same, but the two parts where we've been optimizing, as I said, it was with Codility, because there's trust already. We have got the sort of green light, if you will, and we kind of already did, to progress people if they do well on Codility. And again, we've got this threshold, we can schedule them straight in for the panel. We don't need to seek anyone's permission or approval or insights. Sometimes we do, but typically we don't. And the second place we optimize, which is coincided, is that those interview panels are predefined slots. So each week, those panelists have predefined slots in their calendars that we just slot people into. So our time to get people through the funnel, even in just the 6 weeks, has reduced by about 4.5 days because of this approach. So in such a competitive market, let's be honest, an hour can make a difference. So reducing it even, and again, we're a small data set, but I'm already seeing really promising insights into that time that we're saving to process candidates, to get interviews scheduled, which is a time killer in a lot of cases when you can't marry up interview calendars. So it's tough.
Yes, I think we would all agree with that entirely. What is Vonage doing in order to attract talent now? I know that you're talking about the process you're going through.
Sure.
Do you feel that, especially now, as we talked about being remote first and all of that, do you think these days that it's the expectation that, of course, there'll be the option to work remotely? And I think that's definitely a shift in mindset across tech as an industry. What is Vonage doing specifically that is to attract talent? Manjuri, I'll ask you that in a minute as well.
So to your point, I do see that there is now an expectation from a lot of engineers and a lot of product people that there is the option to be flexible. I wouldn't personally say that I've seen that there's a huge expectation that everyone wants to work remotely fully, but certainly the level of flexibility expectations has changed. I often tell the leaders within our business that in the 12 or so years that I've been in recruiting, this is by far the toughest market, and we have to accept it. We have to accept the fact that this is a tough market. I'm not saying we have to sort of bend to every single person's demands. That's not what I mean. But we have to be accepting that there has been a shift in the market. There has been a change in what people ask for. And it's not just about remote, there's much more to it than just being remote, and, compensation and well-being and, all those other components that people look for when they change jobs. But that has been, I think, a tough thing to get across. And it's not that people weren't accepting. It just took a bit of time, I think, to cross that barrier of, yeah, okay, fair enough. This is a tough market. So most certainly being able to offer people the option to work remotely, to work flexibly, is a huge sell. I wouldn't say, again, just from what I can see personally, that there's a lot of companies that have really embraced it I think, Manjuri, you mentioned that OLX has moved to remote first. We haven't quite got as far as remote first, but we took a step in the right direction at least. But there's still a lot of companies that are asking people to come back to the office as things reopen, and on a regular basis, on a structured basis, not even regular, on a structured basis. So I think the fact that we give people the flexibility, our flexible model is you go in when you would like. It's you have the option, you live close enough. Yeah, there might be some meetings that maybe you need to attend, but generally it's super flexible. Outside of that, Vonage as a brand has been doing a lot of, not necessarily from a TA standpoint, but Vonage as a brand over the last year has really evolved. And we've found we've got a lot of new marketing collateral, a lot of new information that we're able to sort of readily share up front. Perhaps a year ago or 2 years ago, in fact, we had it, but there's a much more consistent brand message, a much more consistent way of us in TA representing our brand into the market. And we're in a position that we can talk more, again, not that we weren't, but because we have more information, we can talk more openly about the technology, about the challenges, about the brand. Who do we help? What do we do? What problems do we solve? And from my experience, that's typically what, good engineers are looking for. What are the problems? How can I help? So those are sort of the two main things that come to mind to your question.
And to you, Manjuri, and with OLX, what kind of things are
Yep.
you doing, maybe that were the same as before, or might be a bit different now to historically, in order to attract talent?
Sure. And to Daniel's point, I'm actually waiting for more companies for them to call people back into offices, really like morning 9 to 5 kind of a thing, so that we can go and hire them. So
yeah, I'm just love that.
I like that.
But so we can poach them. I like it too.
Exactly. And the whole thought of, hey, what did we learn in the past 2 years that we are literally asking them to come back? And also, Daniel, actually, we are remote first on everything product, data, and tech. But we've basically taken on something called as blended work. And what I really like about the approach was internal and external. So we did some feedback as a part of course, we listened to our candidates and their response rate. Initially, when we had not declared that we are going remote first after coming back from the pandemic, etc. Plus, we did a survey within the organization, couple of pulse surveys actually. So saw the appetite for people, and people asked for flexibility. Of course, looking at, and that's where we adopted a blended approach for everything which is customer facing. For example, we do have our retail stores for secondhand car sales, and there the salesperson has to be there, the inspection person has to be there, of course. Second is everything which is non-tech and professional, HR, finance, clearly has the flexibility of deciding with the manager, with the lead, and everything product, data, and tech can be either, again, flexibility. Offices are obviously open, they can come into the office, or they can choose to be remote first. And we're also working out some kind of hub models where if you have more people, say around Portugal, if we have more people in Porto, then we might have a small co-working space in Porto just for people to come together. So, and to your question, flexibility, one of the biggest things that people are looking for. But what got us here till here will not take us till the next milestone. And that's, I think, where the retention part comes in, with ensuring that we still connect with the culture, still connect with the people. And how do we do that post-pandemic if we don't meet on a regular basis, if we don't have those lived experiences? That's, I think, something that all organizations need to figure out. On the attraction piece, we've had a lot of work in the last 2 years, especially around engineering, on some campaigns on storytelling. The bit of stories across different countries became very important. because that connected to the purpose, why they were a part of OLX Group, why they were still continuing with the with the commitment to the purpose as well. So we had a lot of individual stories, team story campaigns. So that's still a connect. I think people also want to see representation. So we ensured that we keep it really from all the employees from different countries, different backgrounds, communities, representation. And we saw the followers also go up from, I think when we started this 1.5 years ago, it was around 90,000, and we touched 160,000 followers on our LinkedIn 4 weeks ago, or I think before 24th of Feb or something like that, before 22nd of Feb. So it was a huge jump with all the campaigns, of course, with a lot of material engagement, etc. There is a definite focus also on looking at the growth and the growth perspective, especially like Dan said, engineers want to solve problems. They are looking for what problems to solve. They're also looking at what kind of impact does that bring in, right? So when we switch, say, to a pay and ship model, what was the impact it was bringing in? Now that we have this whole autos remit going from something around $2 billion worth transactions to really huge 24 to 28 billion transactions, expansion into new markets, etc. So they know that the platform that they are building and working on will be going into this growth perspective, going into this huge market opportunity all across the world. So I think these are some attachments that we've seen. One of the key things in this remote world is the leader pool. This has made a real difference along the process as well. So when they know that they are coming in and working with a magnetic CTO or a magnetic engineering manager, I think that pull has been really, really great in this whole process. And even we see that even in product. That leader pull throughout the hiring process makes a lot of difference for people to then choose. And of course, Dan knows in India, when he said an hour, I could really see into his eyes that he understands. You get counter offers in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
you literally have to, otherwise you'll have dropouts. So that's where the leader makes a lot of difference. So what kind of brand image does the leader have? Does he, she, or they connect into the community? That makes a lot of difference as well.
Yeah, that post-offer engagement strategy is a huge piece that we've worked on over the last 3 or 4 months, noticing that dropout rate increasing in India specifically. Again, not had previous experience of hiring in India, but the leaders that we have out there have, said like this is a challenge generally speaking, but we're in a market where the dropout rate is even more than what is normal, let's say. So similarly to your point, getting the leaders involved and engaged with people post-offer has been a huge help. Getting people pumped, I guess, might be the right way to describe it.
No, I agree. And I think it's one of those things that I hear a lot from various clients that use Codility, and that so we've gone through that process, and you can standardize that as much as you need to, but that little value add of what you guys in TA that you bring and what your teams bring to get them ready, and so that when they're finishing up and they're excited to start solving your problems and actually getting there and getting in. I think that's one of the biggest differentiators for candidates. And I know that obviously you've been with Vonage for 2 years today, Daniel. And as you say, like the process of finishing up at your last job to moving into a new one and getting that when you're getting ready and excited, especially at the beginning of a pandemic, must have been both scary but exciting for you. It is different. I think that we all have to go over and above to try and engage the candidates and make sure the candidate experience is one that's positively remembered. In terms of the candidate experience, has the process of you using Codility, is that changed entirely? What are the key components of the Codility product that you guys get the most out of? Manjuri, do you want to tell us a bit about that in terms of the way that OLX utilize it? Like, what are your key takeaways from Codility to help with your funnel?
Yeah, I think I'll touch upon this D&I bit, which I said that I'll talk about there. And of course, with candidate experience, it has helped us. So we've seen the evidence in our scores as well, and it helps us in the timing, the slotting, ensuring we can make it compact, like Dan was saying. So we go through the code live, and then we bucket everybody into one day's hiring day on people who kind of go through the test, unless there's a huge red flag. So we don't reject, otherwise there's a huge red flag and they do come into the process and the feedback loop, etc. What it has really helped us, and this is the second organization where I saw the help from Codility on this, is ensuring that we remove obstacles for our diverse talent pool. And this was especially when you look at a resume, right? So when you're parsing, we don't use any AI tool, etc. It's still a pretty human-based exercise. So when we are looking at the resume, there might be things I think I talked about this, right? 7, 8 requirements or maybe more. So rather than looking at the check and see, you might say that, okay, this resume may not go through the next round. So what do I do? Maybe I send a feedback, et cetera, and not go ahead with the selection or the movement to the next stage. This process, what happens is we've seen experience, especially around opening up the funnel for gender diversity. So when you see, and it doesn't matter actually even for gender diversity, when you see it's not maybe matching up, send it for a code check, see what comes out of it, right? And in our experience, when I say our, and even in my previous company, this is something that really opened up our funnel. We saw that maybe some cases, the resume, and this is something that we've seen even from LinkedIn reports, that women may not write their resumes as well as men do. Women do not maybe apply to a job as unless they tick all the boxes, etc. Yada. So we've all heard about those reports and surveys and etc. So in this case, we actually saw resumes, especially from women coming through, that would pass the code check, come into the interview process because, of course, they pass the code check, and perform in a very nice manner and actually go through and get hired. But if you go back to the resume, that resume wouldn't be something that you have all the 8 or 9 things on, right? Because they would not write that if it's not there. But they would be able to pass through the, and in this way, this was a learning saying that, right, fine, it's fine. Take a chance, put it through the code check. If not, the person gets feedback and self-learning anyways on how they're solving it, and there'll be, what we also try to do is go back to the repository as such on how many people maybe last 1 year they attempted the test and didn't go through or didn't pass, and then relook, right? After a year, things would have changed. So reach out to them, ask them to retake the test. Are you okay to come into the process, etc. as well. So this ways, I think our funnels really widened with this. So this really helped us.
That's a great idea. For you, Daniel, and the team at Vonage, like, how has that been for you? I'm conscious that we do only have a few minutes left, so I want to answer that question and then get some key takeaways from you both before we conclude.
Sure. So I think that the problem, let's say, that Codility has solved, or one of the main problems that Codility has solved for Vonage, is it's not exactly the same as what Manjuri was describing. Our challenge has always been scaling, ramping up teams and building new teams. Vonage is in a good place at the moment. We're a good business. We're performing well, and so that investment is being made in the engineering teams to continue growing our products and continue scaling our products. And a big ask for our team, our TA team this year, was to really increase the volume of hires. And when I say really, I'm going to tell you the numbers. We had to go from a target of 12 per month to 40 plus per month this year, which is a huge step change. We've invested in our team, we've invested in products and technology that will help us, but ultimately we need candidates, right? We can have as many TAs as we have, but if we can't get the candidates into the funnel and get them through the assessment process, it's kind of redundant in a sense. So where Codility has really helped us is to scale. The fact that we can send anyone really a test, we can get that as part of the assessment process has helped us hugely. The automation, how it integrates with Greenhouse, how it helps the TA team. There's no real hurdles to that. It's so automatic, it becomes like second nature. And when we're dealing with volume, when we're dealing with the fact that we have to hire that many people in such short spaces of time, those small things make a huge difference. They all add up, right? So our ability to scale, our ability to branch out into India, where we had to start from scratch, and the product being so established, and like I said, it's got trust within the organization that we're going to get out of it what we put in, knowing that will be a key component. Has helped us scale up our teams in India as well. And the second thing, I know we're short on time, is Code Live. It's certainly been a big factor in that. The ability to dig deeper into someone's, I've mentioned it before, and I think you just said it, that it's the thought process. How do they solve a problem? Code Live has really helped, and we've seen an increase in requests from managers, especially in the last few weeks, actually, weirdly, for access to Code Live, because they've heard about how it can be leverage during the interview process. And the fact that we can't do anything in person, well, not can't, we're limiting how much we do in person. There isn't that whiteboarding exercise opportunity. There isn't the opportunity to sit next to someone and do pair programming, and CodeLive kind of solves that problem in a virtual world.
It does, for sure. I think it is in that way, and as you say, like being able to just pick things apart and ask questions ad hoc. So if I could ask each of you to share one key takeaway with the audience who have been listening on how to design a better hiring process in 1 minute each, do you think that you can? Daniel, do you want to give us that?
I'll try my best. I'm a big talker. The key takeaway, if I think about the last 2 years, is how do you streamline those bits in between? And what I mean is the scheduling components. How do you streamline how a candidate gets from X stage to Y stage to Z stage? Like, what are the steps in between, and how do you solve or remove those bottlenecks? That to me is the key takeaway to how to design a better hiring process, because that's what's going to save you time. It's going to be much easier for your TA team, it's going to be much easier for your managers, and the core of it, it's going to be a much better experience for the candidate. Was that less than a minute?
It was. I'm impressed.
Thanks.
Manjuri.
My God, you set a different benchmark. Okay, so I'll just go for three words here. Keep it simple, automate as much as possible, and and that's how you make your hiring process scalable.
There we go. That was fantastic. Thank you very much. We only went over by a minute. I can't believe that. I know that as we conclude and end, we are going to go to a product demo that will set so whoever has joined us are able to see what Codility does and the way that it can be utilised. With that, if there are any other questions, I will be able to pick them up and address them directly. But thank you very much for your time, Daniel, and thank you very much for your time, Manjuri.
Thank you, Anne.
I look forward to speaking to you both at some point in the not too distant future.
Thank you so much.
Happy anniversary again, Daniel.
Thank you.
Manjuri. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.